Skinny spazoid. Death is something that is extremely anxiety-inducing. I personally remember having a lot of anxiety about death, and I felt completely trapped and like I was being treated unfairly by the universe. This is a terrible way to feel, so I tried my best to find ways to calm down when I was faced with the issue of death. As an avid parkour practitioner, I can say for sure that these are very useful if you want to still function in society despite all the stress in life. I'd advise anyone to use any of these techniques at their own leisure and to use them whenever they would like, and not inhibit themselves based on if they feel like the situation is too extreme or not extreme enough. Which basically means, take everything that I say in stride. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. If it works for you, don't be afraid of yourself not doing enough. If it works, basically. Number 10, express yourself. A lot of fear surprisingly happens because of a lot of bottled up emotions that people have. We can see this in art, where people feel like art is a kind of therapy for them that lets them release their emotions. Also, we can see this in the classic movie cliche of the elderly person, man or woman, close to death, who keeps thinking about memories of their younger days, afraid and upset because they cannot fully realize these emotions. Personally, I don't think that I could teach such a complicated thing in such a short video. However, I do advise much simpler emotional releases that exist. Some of these releases include screaming into a pillow, or finding an isolated area like a forest. I also suggest doing things like crying or talking to yourself, just talking things through, or talking things through to like a stuffed teddy bear. I personally have done all of these things, and I can say that the experience of doing it was not really like I expected. I expected to kind of be really weirded out with myself, but instead I felt very relieved, and I felt like I could continue my day much easier. Number 9, remember that it is inevitable. A lot of fear that comes from death is a kind of shock that happens when people live their life like they won't die, and then the revelation that it is relevant to their life is too overwhelming. In Tibetan culture, there is a lot of acknowledgement of death, and this is one of the central ideas to the Book of Death, which has a lot of people in similar situations have said that it has helped them. Oftentimes, many branches of spirituality recommend that people make rituals or customs around death. Again, having such fancy cultural practices may not always be very accessible for people, but just doing something as simple as telling yourself that everybody dies can be important. Number 8, loosen up. For those of you who maybe feel a little offended when someone says to not take things so seriously, I just like to say that this probably doesn't apply to you. This is advice more for people who are so serious that they become antisocial and paranoid. Almost all people with a strong understanding of logic don't believe that crazy punishments will destroy their human experience from simple things like just making a mistake or not being able to know every little thing. Some people may not even have any idea what I'm talking about right now, but I know that there are those who do, and all I have to say is loosen up, you're probably overthinking things. Number 7, become used to the fact that there are small things you can't control. This is a sort of anti-jealousy measure. What I mean by this is of those times we want things to change so much because we just have an issue with the way things are. This is one of the things that makes death so frightening, as it is something that nobody wants and happens anyways, whether we want it to or not. Change is something that can be very complicated, but oftentimes people want change so much that they think that they should change little things that are inconsequential. I would suggest not doing this because the stress that you get from worrying about these things is not worth it. Learning to live without worrying overall dissipates stress. Number 6, find a place and just close your eyes and be still. Sometimes we kind of need life to just slow down. Life can feel like it is going too fast sometimes, and it is better to get a grip by having some room for yourself. My next piece of advice to calm down is find a good location, close your eyes, and just do nothing. This may seem kind of silly and self-helpy, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen people cursed by always needing to do something. Number 5, avoiding triggers. This one can seem kind of obvious, but I think it may be a mistake that some genuinely caring people make. A lot of times we feel miserable because everything we surround ourselves with is miserable. It's important to focus on positive things, and that can be impossible when something can trigger your anxiety. Keep in mind, though, to not go overboard with this, as depending on the situation, it may be better to just wait out these triggers. Number 4, avoiding chaos. A lot of stress comes from a feeling of not having control. Because of this, having a sense of order is of course important. Nobody likes to feel like they have no choices in their life because it is too chaotic. Again, this is something very complicated, and I think that people should find order in whatever way fits them personally or fits their personality. I do suggest that people do actively pursue what it is that does work for them. Number 3, relaxing muscles. Stress doesn't just affect us psychologically, but also physically. The easiest example of this is in the muscles. Massages work and are very popular, I personally also like to just be able to let the muscles just shrink into the earth while sitting. You could easily say that just having the freedom to be lazy helps a lot with stress. Number two, working toward goals. Probably one of the most common reasons I get afraid of death is because I'm not doing much in my life. Working towards something makes you feel satisfied with the life you are living, and I often feel at peace or content with death because of this. Number one, breathing exercises. When I get a dose of real fear, like when I'm scaling a building, it's always best to control your breathing. This is because in moments like this, your body goes nuts and you can feel it in your heart and when you hyperventilate. Taking quick, deep breaths helps out a lot. I've also read of other such methods, so I suggest people again experiment and see what works, as there are many different types of ways just to breathe.